This is Alberetor the Haunted Waste, the fifth adventure in the Chronicles of the Throne of Thorns campaign for the Symbaroum RPG by Free League. In this video I will start with an overview over the adventure and some of my highlights, go over some of the scenarios and how I would run them, and finally I will tell you who I think this is for and what other RPG books would work well with this one. Let's get started. Oh, and spoiler warning. This adventure has no player sections. So if you want to play this, send a link to this video to your GM and stop watching right here. The adventure is separated into 3 sections. The first one, War and Blood, is rather short and goes into the background events of the adventure that will happen during the adventure back in Ambrian, but are not actual part of the adventure, because that takes the party into the Lost Land, into Alberetor, the former home of the Ambrian people, on the trail of the lost Queen Corinthia. And this will finally lead them into the storm, into Lyastra, the former realm of the Dark Lords who attacked Alberetor, and after they lost the war and Alberetor was left completely desolate, the people had to flee north of the Titans into what is now Ambrian. The book starts with giving you some historical background about Ambria, Alberetor, Lyastra, the Order of the Kothnik, even background on Lendaria, that is a lost realm on which ruins current-day Ambria is built. This section is a treasure trove for lore hunters. Then we go over the different powerful factions that are involved in the campaign: House Kohinoor and Queen Corinthia, the Sacred of the Old Blood, a secret alliance of corruption-worshipping sorcerers and nobles spreading like a cancer throughout Ambrian society, the Loyalists who are still loyal to the Queen, the Reformists who want to reform the Church of Priors to worship him as the life-giver rather than the Priors of war, the Sovereign Oath, who are a faction of the Davokar clans that seeks to conquer the Davokar region and Ambria south of the Davokar, finally the Witches and the Iron Pact that seek to let the evils of Davokar slumber, and they only play a very minor part in this adventure. But all of these factions can be used as quest givers to send the characters on the search for Queen Corinthia. Then we get the Civil War faction, which is mostly a timetable of events, of important alliances, battles, and sieges about this war that rages throughout the whole year 23. You could set adventures within this war, have your characters take part in it. There are some adventure setups provided here, but mostly you have to work that out yourself, using the rules in the Game Master's Guide and the description of the realm of Ambria in Yndaros, the Darkest Star. The information presented just in this Civil War faction is not enough to build a full adventure from. You will need the other books as well. But likely, the Civil War will happen in the background while your party is occupied elsewhere, on the search for Queen Corinthia in the realms of Alberetor and Lyastra. And it starts with a strong opening, the summoning of the Guardian Cliff, a Lendarian temple structure that had been hidden in the sky for 200 years. But first, the characters will have to get into Stone Oak Castle that has become under siege a few days after Queen Corinthia passed through here. And though the besieging army that the characters can ally with is several times larger than the garrison of the castle, this is a very strong fortification, and a frontal assault will be a very costly affair. But there are several other ways the characters could get into the castle. Via sorcery, perhaps, or via knightly action of swimming through the moat and climbing over the wall, Or maybe they can acquire the information about a secret escape tunnel hidden within these woods and sneak in during the night and open the gates. However they get in, what they have to find is the excavation of old Lindarian tombs underneath the castle. And what they find in here will set them on the path to find the Order the Haunted that has fled from Lindarian during its destruction, and whose trail Queen Corinthia is also following. And there they will find the means to summon the Guardian Cliffs back to the ground. After that, they can climb onto it and explore it. On here, they will find that among the Lindarian temple ruins, a fight between the Queen's Royal Guard, the Panzers, and a group of sorcerers and undead attackers has taken place. Here they can find this map that will lead them to the second part of the adventure. This is a rough map of the realm of Alberetor, and 3 locations have been marked with the symbol of the Order the Haunted. Likely, the Queen has gone her on her quest, and with this map the characters can follow her, trying to find the Queen, or at least pick up her trail. But they will also meet the Duchess Esmeralda, the Queen's half-sister, who has seemingly survived the battle if wounded, and she will tell them that Caluthor the Dark Lord has completely taken control over the Queen, and they are looking for the Rose, the plans that will enable them to claim the Throne of Thorns and use its mystical power to conquer the world. What the characters don't know at this point is that Esmeralda is actually the leader of the sovereigns of the Old Blood, and she and her henchmen and her undead were the ones that attacked the Queen and her panzers. She will try to gain the characters' trust, so they escort her off the cliff and into the realm of Alberetor. During the journey across the Titans to Alberetor in the south, the characters can make an optional stop at the Twilight Monastery, where the monks of the Order of the Black Cloak have incarcerated dozens of abominations for further study in the hope of finding a cure. But someone has opened the cells, and now the monastery is completely overrun by abominations. But depending on the characters' allegiances, they may just leave all of the Black Cloaks and the monastery behind and continue over the Titans, or they may help Father Agathon Soleil, which they might know from the second adventure, the Witch Hammer, and even leave Esmeralda within to escort back to the capital. There are some more optional events you can use to complicate and flavor the journey, among them the encounter with a captured Dark Lord, but eventually they should arrive south of the Titans at the Cliff of Corinda, the last place of safety where they can rest and resupply before the expedition into Alberetor proper begins. During their stay here, Esmeralda will separate from the group and have her minions try to poison and kill them. And after the group hopefully survives that, they can pick up some rumors, maps and a guide, and of course lots of equipment, food and water, before finally venturing out into the lost land Alberetor. In this section we get a description of the general state of affairs in the realm of Alberetor, and it's not pretty. The earth is dead and corrupted, undead and monsters are roaming the land, rivers and lakes are poisoned. This is very dangerous terrain to travel through. We had some places and events that you can use to spice up the travel, especially Ruffalo's Inn's wagons might be expanded upon as a mini-adventure for a whole leg of the journey. But there are a few more of these mini-scenarios for the GM to expand on to make the travel between the major adventure locations more interesting. The next section we get some Alberetor-specific travel misfortunes and random encounters. Also random tables for settlements or terrain that might be found, as well as enemies, encounter and items and treasure tables. among them even some new artifacts. The main attraction, however, are the 3 adventure sites where the group can pick up the trail of Queen Corinthia. We've got Castle Brigo, which is an oasis of life within the desolation of Alberetor, protected by a powerful mystic node, which is, however, failing right now. And even while the characters are adventuring within this site, it might all go to hell. Though we have another castle map, this is not a siege or a battle or anything, this is mostly a social challenge. There are tensions, to say the least, between the Oracle cult, an order of monks that is venerating the Guardian and has been maintaining the mystic protection of Castle Brigo. The House of Brigo, which wants to re-establish control over the whole castle and the region, because the castle has become under siege by a huge mob of refugees. They have nowhere else to go, they're just seeking shelter and protection, but there's just far too many of them to shelter all of them, and there's some undead among them. Throw into that the player characters and the agents of the sovereign old cultists and sorcerers, and you've got a powder keg of a situation waiting to blow. Anyway, the real goal of the characters is to get into the Tower of Omens and study the same documents that the Queen has studied before to pick up her trail. The second adventure site is the Convent School of Numinous Lore, a monastery school where Ambrian nobles send their useless sons and daughters so they can study and they're out of the way. It too is protected from the general undead of Alberetor through mystical means. But shortly after Queen Corinthia passed here, something has happened. A skinless body was found in the library. Something is afoot. This adventure side focuses mostly on atmosphere and horror, and the challenge is to figure out what has caused the murder and a way to defeat the cultist and the demon that are hiding within the monastery and among the residents. The real goal, once again, is to find and examine the documents that the Queen has examined to get more information of where she could have gone from here. The third adventure location is the Veiled Library. Once an astonishing cathedral, it is now inhabited by undead. An undead Alberetonian baroness and her loyal knights, actually, who think the war is still going on, but are suffering in general from amnesia. But they have also spotted an enemy army approaching, which is actually led by a member of the Sovereign of the Old Blood. The challenge here is threefold. First, to parley with the Baroness and gain access to the archives in the cellar. Then to traverse the dungeons in the cellars and find the information you're looking for. And thirdly, get out or defeat the attackers together with the Baroness. Whatever the characters do in the end, they hopefully pick up the information from the important documents, get the final hints they need to find out where the Queen has gone. And the trail will finally lead them to Lyastra, the realm of the Dark Lords. Once again, we've got a good general description of the land, a treasure trove for Symbaroum lore, some people and places, some events you can use to spice up the travel through Lyastra. But the main attractions are just 2 adventure sites. First, Bright Haven Stronghold, the castle of the Dark Lord itself, where Queen Corinthia was held during her captivity, and where the last battle of the war against the Dark Lords was fought and won by the Alberatorian people. But it's still mostly standing. Now inhabited by undead Lystarians, led by Apostle Joab, who is currently absent. This whole adventure sites reminds me strongly of undead burg from Dark Souls. If you have not played Dark Souls, I can strongly recommend that. In this city and in this castle, the undead are trying to live as normally as they can, but it is, of course, impossible. They no longer have human needs and desires. Everything they do is just pointless, hopeless repetition. And the main challenge is not so much to defeat these undead, but just to distract them long enough to sneak into the castle and get into its tallest tower. Up here they will find a map drawn by the Dark Lord himself that will lead them to the final adventure site, and along the way they can pick up their own airship drawn by flesh-grafted undead. And that will come in very handy for travel in Lyastra and to get to the last location. Hidden on a small island within a large lake, shielded from undead and demons by a mystical storm, is an Ambrian completely frozen by preserving magic, where, among other astonishing plants, the roseae are kept. The name-giving plants whose thorny veins are needed for anyone who wishes to sit on the Throne of Thorns and wield its immense godlike power. The Queen and her surviving retinue has already arrived, but they are stuck, because Colothor, the Dark Lord, has realized that there is no reasoning with the Queen. He cannot stop her from pursuing the Throne of Thorns, so he decided to destroy the boat they arrived in and die together with the Queen. But then Esmeralda arrived together with her goons. She has spoken to her half-sister and they have negotiated, and for now there's a truce. But the Queen doesn't know yet the true extent of her half-sister's treachery. And then into this tense situation come the player characters. And no matter which side they take in this conflict, or if they take neither side, there's a tough battle for survival and the future of Ambria and the whole world ahead of them. And should the characters survive, they can hopefully return with the Rosari, maybe not, maybe with the Queen, back to Ambria, before a harsh winter descends on the lands north of the Titans, pretty much freezing the whole situation until Davokar awakens in the final adventure of the campaign. The book ends with some potential developments and fallout of the result of this adventure and what may come next. There's a few things I'd like to highlight and tell you how I would run them, starting with the Create Goroth ritual. This basically creates a flesh puppet for the sorcerer to control. Their real body will be in a trance when they control the flesh puppet. Other than that, the puppet is indistinguishable from a real person, besides it having no shadow. And this allows the sorcerer to be in two places at once and have a flesh puppet they can commandeer to do really dangerous stuff while their real body is safe. Now, this is important because the Esmeralda that the characters meet, that tries to poison them, and they will meet again at the very end of the adventure, is actually a Goroth. This becomes only important at the very end of the adventure, when the real Esmeralda actually decides to show up in person and uses the Goroth as an anchor for a portal ritual. But I think it would be nice if the characters were aware that something like this exists before the final. So you might want to give out a description of this ritual to the characters before the finale. And there's ample opportunity in the tombs and libraries and castles that the characters are exploring along the way. The Brighthaven Stronghold and the Central Tower might be a pretty good place to give this information to the players, for example. A scene that you have to handle with care is the betrayal of Esmeralda of the party and the poisoning and assassination attempt of the party. This is a real threat of a TPK if not handled carefully. The poisoner knows her stuff. She is using the blood shrouding ritual to appear as one of the waiters and poison the character's food. The poison is both very hard to detect and very potent. The victim takes d8 damage for d8 turns, while also being paralyzed for d6 turns. It's a bit random, this could be anything between 1 and 64 damage, but it's potentially deadly. So I'd say if the characters are suspicious about Esmeralda, and are suspecting that something is fishing with Esmeralda and this meeting at the tavern, then don't make the test so hard. On that, you can just hope that the very powerful high-level party will survive this. The poisoning and the following ambush if they are tracking the poisoner. In the Covenant School of Luminous Law, I would try to draw out the initial investigation and murder mystery plot before the summoner and her demon is confronted. Basically, you have a summoner who's using the blood shroud ritual to appear as one of the students of the monastery, and an invisible, powerful demon who's going through the library searching for everything that Corinthia has touched. So you might draw this conflict out by the summoner trying to eliminate any witnesses. So while the characters are here, there could be many more murders, many more monks and students going missing, flayed bodies being found, and eventually attempts on the characters' lives when they are separated from the group. Then they can chase the summoner, but will eventually only find a mass of flayed skin, while the summoner has changed her appearance again by murdering another victim. What you eventually want is the characters to be suspicious about everyone. You want a scene where they are holding all of the monks captive with a flamethrower, trying to find out who is the summoner. And only when the summoner is found out and chased into the library, backed into a corner, should the real fight against her and the demon begin. One of the major challenges in the dungeon and the Veiled Library are traps. But the way the adventure tells you to run traps, which is basically a roll on Vigilant, then maybe you can try to dodge the trap and then you take damage if you fail that as well, is just frustrating and boring in my opinion. If you want to know how I would run traps, I've got a dedicated video for that, link up here. In the end, who is this adventure for? Well, it is, of course, for those who have played the 4 previous adventures and want to find out how this goes on. It is a treasure trove for lore hunters, because the adventure leads you back into the old realm of Alberetor and Lyastra. You find out secrets of the background of the world and of Ambrian and its people that had only been hinted at before. Very interesting from that aspect. Because Alberetor and Lyastra are such blight-stricken, life-threatening places, you also get a strong post-apocalyptic survival horror vibe in these adventures. These are no longer places where humans can live. They also serve as a stark warning about what will happen to Ambrian and the Davokar region if the war and the exploitation of nature is not stopped, if Ratha awakens. This has happened, is happening, will happen again. Other books to use this with are the Symbaroum GM Guide, which is almost mandatory, the Monster Guide as well. If you want to go into the Civil War in more detail, you will need the description of Ambrian and its baronies, so you will need Indaros, the Darkest Star. This adventure is not really compatible with other rule systems. You would have to do some serious reworking of all of the stat blocks for every NPC and all of the spells and abilities to run this with another system. So if you want to play this with Ruins of Symbaroum, the 5e version of the game, I'd suggest you wait until the 5e version of this campaign comes out. And if you want to run this with a completely different rule set, maybe Dragonbane, maybe the Forbidden Lands, or maybe Shadowdark, then you've got your work cut out for you. You can't use any of the stats, though you can use all of the descriptions, pictures and maps in here. You can of course just use this as inspiration for something completely different. For now, I bid thee farewell, dreamers, until Davokar awakens, and we shall meet again.